Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington. And today I'm joined by one of my longtime friends and someone I've worked with a lot and even did the florals at Dorothy and my own wedding. It's Katrina Allen of Love Blooms Wedding and Event Design. I want to thank you so much for coming on today and joining me to talk about you and your company. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Thanks, Reed, for that. My name's Katrina, like you said, and I own a floral and wedding coordinating company named Love Blooms. And we also just recently opened a wedding venue called Evergreen Meadows.
And how did I'm sure that'll be a topic for a long discussion, but what was it about kind of starting a wedding venue that got you guys excited?
Ever since I started the business, I knew that it was in my future to own a wedding venue. I like being able to be the first stop in the client's to-do list for planning their wedding. I wanted to create a beautiful outdoor garden venue on the east side because as of now, if a client wants to get married in that sort of a setting, they have to go to Puyallup, Tacoma area, or they have to go to Snohomish. There wasn't a whole lot of options in the Bellevue, Snoqualmie, Seattle area. So I kind of wanted to fill a niche for my clients that hire me to plan their wedding, but then also other clients that live in this area that don't want to travel very far to their wedding venue.
Awesome. And then obviously with your background of being an event wedding design coordinator. I'm sure that'll give you lots of insights of what works and what doesn't work. Talk to me a little bit about your team and kind of, how you guys specialize and help couples out on their wedding day.
So, Love Blooms being a wedding planning company, we have various packages that we offer to our clients to help with as much or as little as they are wanting when planning their wedding. So they can hire us from the beginning to help plan their entire wedding. They can hire us in the middle when they realize that planning a wedding is taking up more time than they originally had anticipated, or it's just more stressful than they were wanting, or they can hire us as a day of coordinator where we come in and help execute all of their plans that they've had while planning their wedding for a year or however long they've been planning. And then we offer floral and decor services outside of that. So our planning couples are welcome to hire us to do their floral and decor, but we also have that service available to clients that don't have us as their wedding planner.
Yeah, and I think we actually met at a styled shoot, and then we've done a couple different style shoots and weddings. And I know with Sally and Nick, we were there together, and then with Rihanna and Wes last summer. So it's always fun. What was it about? Did you always want to be involved in weddings? Was this something you envisioned? You're kind of smiling. Talk to me about kind of how this journey came about.
I actually, when I was 17, I decided that I was going to be a registered nurse. So making a long story short, I was on that train, not looking back for a long time. And I did my prerequisites and then I applied for nursing school thinking I'd be on the waiting list for years. And I was one of 10 people to get accepted to this nursing school in San Francisco. And I was 2 years into nursing school when I was planning my own wedding. And I was planning a wedding from California in Seattle. And so it had a lot of obstacles, and I had a very small budget, so it had even more obstacles. And then I had some pretty terrible bosses. And so having terrible bosses along with planning my own wedding created this doubt in my mind as far as if I wanted to be a registered nurse and work for the man and have these terrible doctor bosses that don't appreciate nurses at all for what they do. I was nannying for a nurse who just had to work nights, and she never saw her husband, and she missed the child's first steps and milestones. And so there's a lot of kind of factors once I, being stubborn like I am, allowed into my life and really actually thought about it. And I realized I didn't want to work for the man. I wanted to be my own boss. And so, like I said, I was planning my own wedding, and then I realized that starting a business is a lot of money, and I was putting myself through college, so I did not have a single cent to my name. So what can I do that isn't a lot of startup cost that I'm good at? And I was like, hey, I planned my wedding and I was pretty good at it. So let's create a company. So that is what started Love Blooms, as a wedding and event planning company. And then I changed my major from registered nurse to business, and then finished out my degree in business. My parents about had a heart attack because I only had like 1 year left of nursing school. So they couldn't believe that I was like, no, I don't think it's for me. So then 4 years into planning, I had a client. I was coordinating her wedding, and she was like, hey, I need you to do flowers for me. And I was like, I've never done flowers. You're out of your mind. Go to the market. They have options. And she's like, no, it's not what I want. I can't afford that. Could you please? And it's always been my philosophy in business to try everything once, because you don't know what you're going to like or what your niche is until you try it. So I was like, all right, I'll do your flowers. What do you want? And so, of course, she picked out these huge centerpieces that were like 3 feet tall. And I was like, okay, yeah, you got it. You got it. So I watched some YouTube videos. So, of course, now I'm a professional at doing flowers. And I watched a YouTube video and ordered my flowers. I was all set and ready to go. And I was like looking at the flowers and looking at this piece of foam that's on top of this skinny little vase, going, how is that supposed to turn into this big, large arrangement? So my mother-in-law, bless her heart, called in a favor from one of her old florist friends. She came over. She's like, well, where's your greenery? I was like, I hate greenery. I'm not using greenery in these. That's ugly. And she's like, oh, no, sweetheart. You need to use some greenery to hide that foam, and then you can put your flowers in there. So the market was closed for the day. The wedding was the next day. So we were out just cutting greenery off my mother-in-law's bushes. And I just enjoyed every second of putting these flowers together, stumbling the entire way, learning. And so I put the flowers together. They turned out actually really great, and delivered them. And she was just in love. And I realized that I really enjoyed the creativity that floral allows, and designing. And so I decided that Love Blooms needed to grow into a floral and decor business as well as planning.
That's awesome. I love it. What was it about being a nurse and that whole thing? And I have a lot more questions, but what was it about? Was it helping people? What was it about that specifically that kind of drew you to that major in the first place?
Problem solving. And interesting enough, now that I do, wedding planning and floral, and I still get the problem solving aspect that I loved. And so, although way different, I'm taking care of people as a nurse than I'm planning weddings now, but I still get to problem solve.
So problem solving. Yeah, I would have to imagine that your parents would be quite terrified to switch a major like that. Did you guys have any history? I always ask this, any history of entrepreneurship, or was this just kind of you going out on your own here?
Come to find out, my mom's dad didn't finish middle school. And he owned his own rock company. And it's a really successful rock company in Cleellum. So yeah, there's a little bit of it, but other than that, nothing.
Were you scared at all, or were you just kind of young and excited?
Um, I was scared because, like I said, I was putting myself through college. Just had recently got married, living in California where the rent is so expensive. And before I was working for the Veterans Hospital, and there was a guaranteed paycheck. So when you own your own business, there are no guarantees. And so it was scary to know, like, if I don't get, if I don't book this client, then nobody's getting Christmas presents. But it was worth it.
Talk about how did your wedding planning end up finishing up? That you said this kind of inspired you during that. Tell me about how did it all work out?
My wedding, or
Yeah,
yeah. Yes. It was 105 degrees. We did not have air conditioning, so everybody was drenched in sweat. But I've heard from a lot of people, not directly towards me, so you kind of feel like it might be true, that it was one of the most fun weddings that they've ever been to, because it was just real, and it was just us and our family and friends having a good time.
Were there any lessons that you learned just having gone through that process that you relate to clients now?
You pay for what you get. So I had a $10,000 budget and 300 people to feed. So I got my DJ off of Craigslist, my photographer off Craigslist. Actually, I got all of my vendors but my florist and caterer off of Craigslist. And some worked out and some didn't. But and so so that is definitely one of the biggest things, is that you pay for what you get. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everyone starts somewhere, and I think Craigslist. You just need to always be like, know what you're getting, and sometimes you luck out. I mean, I got my first wedding off Craigslist, and I'd like to think that we've progressed a little bit since then, but maybe not. Talk about your first wedding, then, when you decided to start the company, and how did that go? Were you terrified having the first client, or how did that go?
Oh, I was terrified. Well, so when I first started, I charged $100. That pretty much covered gas. Maybe not. It was in San Francisco because that's where I was living at the time. It was like a 120 person wedding. The client was super sweet. And I'll always remember this because it was before there were smartphones. That's how long ago I started Love Blooms, if anyone's doing the math right now. So I'm at this wedding venue. The wedding went really well. I was scared. I was so scared, so nervous. I was like, what? I just did my own wedding. Like, I hadn't interned for anybody. I hadn't gone to school to be a wedding planner. I'm like, what? I don't know what I'm doing. This is a huge mistake. And I asked my husband to come along with me, and he was like, no, you dug this hole and you're gonna figure it out. Thanks, babe. You're so sweet. The wedding went really well. I just, my motto in my business has always been, do what you expected or you wanted. So what, in what would you expect your wedding planner to do, or what would you want? So that kind of guides me in all the calls that I have to make as far as like, should we do X, Y, or Z? So anyways, the end of the night, we're on like the top of a hill in San Francisco in the middle of nowhere. And I don't have a smartphone. And I have I've cleaned up the venue. It's like an hour and a half after the bride and groom have left. And I've got this couple that's sitting like on the sidewalk. And I'm like, what's going on? And we called the taxi and they never showed up. And I was like, okay. And without a smartphone, no Uber, like way before Uber or Lyft, and I can't Google like another taxi company. The building's locked at this point now, and it's freezing San Francisco weather. So I ended up taking them home. because it's like I can't just leave this couple here. We don't have any ability to call a taxi company because the only one we know of is the one they called. So I ended up, yeah, taking these two guests of the wedding home. Which thinking about it now, it's like, what was I doing? But
Yeah,
um,
insurance
no,
liabilities are going crazy.
everything. I had no idea who these people are, like nothing. I had no idea where I was taking them. Like, what if they lived in the ghetto? Just, but it was all, I mean, it was for the client, right? Like I do everything for the client, whatever needs to happen to make the memory of their wedding perfect. I do it. So yeah, I had some like decor stuff in my car, so I had to put that like in the trunk real fast and move my school books or whatever. But yeah, so I took them home. But it was a good wedding. I will never ever forget that wedding, as how like just scared I was, of nervous.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny to think about what you get away with or what we got away with. And then the further you look back and you're like, wow, that was a really terrible, just a horrendous idea. But I'm glad that that worked out.
Yeah.
Um, how long were you doing Love Balloons in San Francisco then?
Oh boy. Let's see. We moved 3 years. I was yeah. Love Blooms was in San Francisco for 3 years.
Was that a tough transition then coming into Seattle and kind of having to not rebrand, but kind of relocate your brand?
Well, I knew about 3 months into moving to California that California was not for me. Um, and so I tried to move back to Seattle, but the credits, my college credits weren't going to transfer smoothly. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna pedal to the metal. I'm gonna get my degree, and not. I'm just gonna make it happen. So actually, when I met my husband, well, we were friends first, but when we went on our first official date, I told him I'm moving to Washington the second I graduate. So we can either stay friends or we can see where this is going, but I am moving to Washington. So I did the same in my business. When I started it in San Francisco, I started it in Seattle because I knew that I would be moving back to Seattle. So so we did. I hired my cousin to do a few weddings here while I was still in California.
That's awesome. That's very smart. Yeah, I always fear about the whole like branding and
Yeah.
whatever, and then you have to move. And then, did you find what was the biggest difference between doing weddings in San Francisco and doing weddings in Seattle? I'm sure there was quite a few.
It's yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's very different. However, the weddings that I was getting there, because of my price point, were, they were lower budget weddings. And so they were a lot of work for me, because the weddings didn't necessarily have a caterer who were busting the tables. So I was busting the tables. I also had a very crazy idea that I was going to start renting out linens. So I created a lot of work for myself because if you hired me as your coordinator, then you get 50% off of your rentals. And so I did tablecloths and napkins and chair covers and chair sashes along with coordinating the wedding. So when I moved to Seattle, I knew I was not going to bring that part of the business with me. And so by the time I moved to Seattle, being 3 years into it, my price point was a little more. My weddings were a lot easier in Seattle than they were in San Francisco. And then I do, every once in a while, I'll get a client that finds me on Yelp in San Francisco. So I'll do a wedding there still. And I'd have to say that the weddings actually are very, very similar for me, because they're the same budgets. They're they're all in most of them are in San Francisco, so the weather besides the rain is pretty similar, kind of cold and gray. So it is similar, but I'd have to say I had a client who was from California getting married in Nevada. And I did her wedding in Tahoe. And it was so nice to have a coordinator from Seattle who's used to the rain and not California, because it was raining. And I was like, it's going to clear up. I can tell by the clouds. We've got this. We're going to have an outdoor ceremony. And sure enough, but right before she walked down the aisle, it cleared up. The chairs were dry. And so the weather kind of plays a part if it shifts in California. But no, the weddings are pretty similar.
Isn't it funny how, and it wouldn't necessarily think, but like, generally, if you're getting paid a little bit more for the wedding, it's going to be a little bit easier work. And I'm someone that likes to work, so maybe, you might take a Sunday at a little bit of a reduced rate, or if it's off season, or, you're just kind of trying to fill the dates. And it's always like the ones that you take a little bit less,
Yeah.
usually, then it's a
Yes.
lot more work. And you're like, man, like, because they'll ask, like, oh, well, what if you only have like you come and we don't have a second videographer and then we can cut off a little bit? And I'm like, no, like that's more work for me now if I have to. But you would think the opposite. You'd think the more money you're making, the more work you'd be doing, but sometimes it's the opposite.
Yeah, well, the high you would think that the more they pay, the more they expect, but it's definitely the clients that are like, "Oh my gosh, it's $500. That's so much money." They're expecting like $6,000 worth of stuff for the $500. Yeah, I say that all the. I think that all the time, and I've just recently had a few conversations with other vendors about that.
What have you? How have you worked to kind of make yourself stand out in terms of your brand and your company in Seattle? Has it been challenging just in terms of like saturation, or how has that gone for you guys over the last? I mean, it's been a long time now, so.
Yeah, I think that I've always tried to keep my price point middle of the road. I don't want to be the lowest, but I'm like you, where I like to work. I like to work hard, and so I don't want to price myself where I could do 5 weddings and make just as much as if I did 20. I'd rather do 20. So I think price point wise, I've set myself apart a little bit because, you're paying for those years of experience, but I'm not charging as much as other people that have just as much experience. And then the fact that I do floral and decor. There's a few coordinators out there that also do floral and decor, but it's definitely, my clients love it because it makes it easier for them. They only have to find one vendor versus three, coordinator, floral, and a decor person. So, and then I just show up with the flowers, and then I take them all away at the end of the night. So it's easier for them.
Yeah, that's something that I've struggled with too. Kind of we're in the off season right now, kind of prepping for next year in terms of like, I went back and kind of crunched a bunch of numbers on my side in terms of like years and hours and weddings and all this stuff. And like, yeah, it is hard sometimes, not necessarily like charging what you're worth, but it's especially like charging what you know or what you've been through. I mean,
Yeah.
like, especially like having started back as long ago as you have, like, it's just you've just seen a lot more stuff than someone that's kind of started even in the last like 3 or 4 years. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And do you sense the couples get that or not? I mean, I sense a lot of times, like if I have a couple, pass me on for somebody else, it's a little bit cheaper. I always think like, well, I hope that they're, going to be experienced enough to help me, because I want everyone to be successful. So do you
Yeah.
find that?
Yes, I do believe. I mean, at least I post my prices on my website, which is nice. I don't have to have that money conversation with my clients at the actual meeting. And the reason I do that is so that I am getting the person that is appreciating my experience and the fact that I'm charging more because I'm experienced. Um, and then there are people who, they're totally honest with me about it and go, yeah, it's a little more than we were hoping to spend. And, I'm talking to this other coordinator and she only charges $500. And she says that she's going to do everything that you do. So we have to have a conversation about, I bring up things when I first started that happened then, and now 10 years down the road don't happen anymore because I plan accordingly. I plan ahead for that. I know that it's a common thing that happens. I know the questions to ask the vendors and the caterers and the client to make sure these things don't happen. And the knowledge that I have now is because as I was growing and only charging $100 and then $500, somebody had to stumble and fall in order for me to learn, oh, okay, that's not what we do. We need to do this, or that's a question I need to ask them ahead of time so I don't have to come ask them on the dance floor. So that's a conversation that the client and I have. And then obviously it's up to them whether they want to pay for more experience in a smoother ride, or if they, would rather go budget conscious and get somebody that doesn't have as much experience.
What are one or two of those things that you wish that people knew more, asked more about, or, the kind of pitfalls that you see that you're constantly, like you said, things that you've dealt with, or what are some common things that couples could learn that you wish they knew?
My biggest thing is the caterer. So they reach out to the caterer and they're like, hey, I need food. Here's my budget. And the caterer puts a proposal together. And if it's not like an in-house caterer, sometimes they put that budget together and they have them leaving at, like, the staff of the caterer leaving at 9:00 when the event's not over until 11. And so now there's 2 hours of people eating cake and drinking and all of those cups that are just everywhere and nobody is cleaning them up. But the client doesn't know any better. They don't they don't think about, oh yeah, who's going to do those things the last 2 hours, or who's going to take the trash away at the end of the night. So a lot of them have to do with caterers trying to be within their budget, but not telling them what corners were cut to get there. And so that's something that I look at, for the client to make sure that at the end of the night, we're not stuck with a huge mess that now their parents have to clean up. So that's one of the things. I think one of the things also is not knowing exactly what they need from their photographer. Do I need 2 photographers versus 1? Do I need the rights to the photos, or do I need an album? Do I need them for hair and makeup, dancing? What kind of, do I need them for 12 hours? So kind of steering them in the direction of what they actually need and want versus, like, their 3 packages that the photographer offers.
I was going to say too, I see like order of things, sometimes, interesting. So, like we've talked like on here, couples that have a date, but don't have a venue. I'm talking to a couple right now that had a photographer, but didn't even have a venue yet. And like, so that means they didn't have a date. And then they're trying to, and I was like, just sometimes like the order of things and how people go back, like I think you need to have a venue before you have a date, and then you can book other things. Do you find that too, the couples, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. I had a conversation just recently with a client because she it said that they had a $10,000 budget, which they realized that they're not going to be able to withhold. I was like, okay, well, just send me what you have budget-wise, what you spent, and I'll look over it. Sure enough, they had booked 4 things: the venue, the photographer, the videographer, and myself. And they were already at 10,000 and some change. And I go, well, did you hire a caterer yet? And they're like, oh, no, we haven't. I was like, okay. Well, the way you're going, you're looking at spending like $30,000 on your wedding if you haven't, hired food. So yes, that's a huge, huge problem because what are you going to do? You've spent your entire budget and you don't have food yet. So there's definitely a better order to go about it. I have had clients reach out to me to do their flowers, and they don't have a venue or a date yet. And I was like, well, why don't you get a venue, get a date, That way we can kind of design your floral accordingly. Because what if you book a place that has maroon carpet and you wanted red flowers? Like, maybe it's not going to look so good in your venue. And so I think there are definitely clients who have things that are like so important to them, and it doesn't matter what they are, they're just going to book those things and then kind of fill in the pieces afterwards. But to your point, if you don't have a venue and a date and you're reaching out to photographers, what if they're not available on the date that you actually choose? Or vice versa. I've had a client, she booked me and me as her wedding coordinator, her photographer, and a DJ. And then she found her venue. And so she had to work around our schedules to book the date. And I was like, that is such an unnecessary headache. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of an order that needs to happen to keep your budget in line, but also keep it easier on the client.
Yeah, I know that, and Dorothy and I were the worst. And I know when we had, I think, a 13 or 14-month engagement, and we had worked together, and I knew I wanted to use you for florals, and like Dorothy, we didn't know what we wanted, and we didn't know, and we had the date and everything, and I said, okay, well, we just need to like get her reserved here, and I was like, literally just like whatever we need is like a minimum to get this going. Cause I was like, we have planned this so far in advance, and I'm going to be so upset if like these vendors that we're trying to book and it's not working. So I know that like, even with that, I was like, all right, tell me what we need now to get this booked for this date. And then we can figure out if we need, 3 corsages or 4 down the line or whatever else is going on.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the couples that are attracted to you guys and your company, and couples you like to work with, and weddings you kind of like to do.
Well, I love a client who I had really last Saturday, I had an ideal client. She was like, it's my wedding, and the most important thing is that I'm there, he's there, and we get married. And that is absolutely what it is about. And all of everything else, when it comes down to it, is just extra fluff that is nice. But if it goes wrong, it is not the end of the world. So she had like her veil laying on the bed because she didn't want to get it all wrinkled. And her mom was like, wait a second, somebody's going to sit on that. And what is it? And the bride was like, Mom, it's okay. It's okay. It's there. I'm watching it. And if somebody sits on it or it rips, oh, well. And I was like, yes, like you're going to enjoy your wedding. Cause this was like the first thing, right when I came with the flowers to say good morning and hello or whatever. I was like, yes, like that is the right attitude. It's a veil, and you spent like $200+ on it, and you'd love it to be in one piece when you walk down the aisle. But if it doesn't happen that way, as long as you walk down that aisle and you get married, oh well. So my ideal client is one that doesn't get caught up in the very, very small details of things that it doesn't matter. I had one client who emailed me, and she wanted me to send her a picture of the red rose that I use because she wanted the exact same shade for her pocket squares. And I said, you know what? The red rose I'm going to send you today might not be the red rose that I get tomorrow, and I'm not in control of that. So no, I'm not going to send you a picture. It's going to be red. And if you're that concerned to match, then either don't get pocket squares or don't get boutonnieres, because it doesn't matter. When it comes down to it, it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, when I meet with clients and they're like easygoing, not caught up in the stupid small details, but also aren't one of those ones that's like, doesn't know anything about anything or care about anything. Because what happens is the entire process of planning, they're like, oh, I don't care, whatever. If they show up, they show up. We'll have open seating, and we'll have 10 tables, and I just assume that'll be enough. And then all of a sudden, a week before the wedding, they care about everything. And it's like, whoa, you've had me for a year and you didn't care. And now it's like 1 week before the wedding and everything is set and you want to change everything. So those are a little hard. And then the only other one that is huge for me is the bride has to have friends. She has to have bridesmaids, and if she doesn't have bridesmaids, if she chooses not to have bridesmaids because they don't want to make their best friends pay $200 for a dress, or fly in and go to a bachelorette party and pay for a dress and pay for the flight, and then it's because of considerate reasons. Good, I'm good with that. But I had a bride who I should have known, but she didn't have any bridesmaids, and it was not because of considerate reasons. She had nothing to do the day of her wedding. She had no one to be with or entertain her, keep her mind occupied. So she was micromanaging every step of everything. I'm surprised they didn't kill her because she was terrible. It was then that I realized if they don't have a bridesmaid or groomsman, and it's not because they're being nice, you're not the client for me, because I can only take being micromanaged so much before I'm like, okay, step back. I do this for a living. I know what I'm doing. Let me set it all up, and then you can come down here. And if you do not like everything, then we can change it at that point. And then floral wise is the client who kind of knows what they want, but isn't like so stuck on it has to be 12 inches wide of a bouquet, or I have to have this certain flower, because of course that flower isn't available when they're getting married, or it doesn't come in the color that they saw on Pinterest, or something like that. And then I get stuck and I feel like I'm crushing their dreams because I have a reality of a budget versus what you can what the look that you can afford and what you want, or, well, sorry, you fell in love with that flower, but you can't have it because it's not available. So one that's kind of like, I like the look of this, but I don't really care, what flowers you use.
Yeah, that was tough too. And I will say, like, as someone that went through the floral planning, to not get, we're like, well, only certain things are available or in bloom, or, it is like a seasonal thing. I'm like, that is not something I deal with. And so that was very insightful for us to kind of go through that process as well. Of like, well, it is more of like this look or a vibe or a theme versus like, it's going to be 6 of this and 2 of this, and they're going to be, Your veil story made me laugh. Years ago now, it was Jeff, my assistant. I think it was like the 3rd wedding we had ever done, and he had just come on, and I had been doing weddings for a couple of years, and he like the first couple weddings had gone really good, and so he's like, whatever, this is like easy peasy, and the bride's getting ready, and we're at her apartment. It's like really quiet, like it's just her and like 2 friends, and they're kind of getting ready, and we go to get her veil on, and there's like this little rip in it, and she had a meltdown, like Jeff had never seen before. And he was like looking at me like, I don't know what to do here, because it was the first time. Then, you kind of get used to it then, I mean, stuff happens. And he was like, ugh. And luckily, they happened to get her dress and veil at this bridal shop. They just happened to be like a mile away from their house, and they just happened to be open at 9 a.m. on this. I mean, it was like, what are the chances that like most people like, oh, I got my dress in Redmond and we're getting married in Puyallup and they're closed. Or I just couldn't believe. And I was like, man, but I told Jeff, I said, that was like a good lesson, because we didn't actually have to learn any lesson, but it was a good like experience to go through of being like, it's not all going to be, you kind of got to be prepared for that sort of stuff. You know what I mean?
I'm a professional veil hemmer now. I've figured out how to perfect putting it back together and not letting it be known that it actually happened.
We had a photographer. It was his wife was his second, and she carried a sewing kit because she had a bridesmaid pop the back of her dress, just something had torn, and she goes, "I tell you," she's like, "if you'd be surprised more than often how often I'm, kind of on my knees hemming this or sewing up a seam or something, as we're getting ready to do bridal party photos or something."
Oh yeah. Yep.
Are you, as someone that is plans and likes to plan ahead, have you found success in that in terms of just knowing, do you enjoy that kind of having your toolkit and going out, or what do you think about?
I do. Yes. Well, that's what I loved about nursing is problem solving. So
exactly.
It's kind of like I don't wish and I don't hope that something goes wrong. But when it does, I'm like, yeah, like I go into this, like in my mind, obviously I don't like jump for joy in front of the client, but in my mind, I'm like, all right, problem solved. Here we go. Like, what's the solution? What's the plan B? What can I do to fix this? And to, come to the rescue.
That's awesome. Yeah, you don't want to make them think you're excited about it, but secretly you're like, oh yeah.
Yes. No, keep that inside.
Yeah, I was. My other note I was going to say is, in terms of like you said, the couples that are easygoing and then not. Yeah, if you have concerns, definitely voice. I have very extensive questionnaires that I send out before my wedding, and I know that they're somewhat overwhelming sometimes to people, but it's to get all that info, and it's always the ones that I send, and it's like, oh, whatever. And then after the wedding, and then they have like a lot of questions about their video, and I'm like. That's why I've been trying to go through this with you guys for the last 6 months. Like I get that there's a lot to do here, but you can't. But it's like once it's right about there, especially like I said, once it happens, like once couples get done with, at least for me, get done with the wedding, and it's like, oh, well, now we can actually like focus. Like what can we focus on now, like the video or the photos or the whatever, the album afterward or whatever. So it's kind of funny how people approach that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I in my floral contracts I break it down, like corsages, and if it's a pin on or a wrist, and it says on there that it's pin on or wrist, but I can't tell you, or I'll say I'm using a rose and baby's breath and gunna eucalyptus, and it is. I mean, it's not in the fine print; it is right there, like you cannot miss it. And I have clients that will call day of and go, there's no corsages in all of this. And I go, yeah, it's the one with the 3 spray roses and baby's breath. Well, those, they have pins. It's not a wrist corsage. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what you ordered. And it said on the contract that you signed. And then 3 weeks before your wedding, I sent it to you and I had you look it over again and you approved it. And then Saturday's wedding, she was like, it's supposed to be halfway through the reception. She's like, it's supposed to be a full open bar, but they've just been serving beer and wine the whole night. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's a huge like thing that that the venue did. Oh my goodness. Well, no, I go to the office to talk to the venue coordinator, and it's right there in the contract, beer, wine, and signature cocktails. That was sent to her numerous times. And so she, after the wedding, on Sunday, she texted me. She's like, whatever happened about that? And I go, well, it was in the contract, just beer and wine. And she's like, oops. So clearly she didn't read it. So that's a huge thing, is getting clients. We spend, I'm sure you do as well, your questionnaire. It didn't take you 2 minutes to put that questionnaire together. And there's a lot of thought that you put into that so that you know exactly what they want when you're shooting it. So for them to come afterwards and be like, oh, hey, yeah, I hope you got a shot with my grandma. And you're like, great. Like things I needed to know before you walked down the aisle.
That's always the worst. Yeah. Is that like after like, oh, we really hope to see this captured in the thing. And you're like, oh no. Just one final note on this. And then I want to switch subjects. Clients, read your contracts. Read your contract.
Yes.
I have a 6-page contract, and I know, DocuSign tells me when you click to read the contract, and sometimes I am amazed at how quick it's like, oh, it's signed and returned, and I'll be like, there's no way that they read that. And then I mean, it's just a 6-page contract. There's no way they read that in 2 minutes, but
Yep.
it's just like, I guess we're just that enticing to work with that it's just
Right.
like,
They just put their full trust in us. Who cares what the contract says?
So I want to round out the conversation today. Talk about this venue now again, and kind of using your knowledge and expertise. And how did this come about? I know you guys found some property, and it was a little bit of back and forth, and however much detail you went into that.
Yeah. So shortly after, like I said, starting Love Blooms, I decided that I wanted to eventually own a wedding venue. So we went searching. It took us 3 years to find this property that we found. It's in Snoqualmie. It's 9 acres. It's surrounded by beautiful evergreen trees. And I love barn weddings, but that wasn't for me. Ballroom weddings are very pretty and elegant, but that wasn't the look I was going for. I really wanted a true to Seattle area, Pacific Northwest, evergreen trees and green grass and beautiful lined tent with chandeliers, and you get married in the gardens. And I wanted that, and so knowing that I was going to go into the wedding venue, eventually, every single wedding venue that I went to for these last 10 years, I've been taking notes in my head about what I liked and what I didn't like and what worked and what the client was complaining about or what the client really enjoyed. So this wedding venue is being created with 10 years of feedback from vendors and brides and grooms. So the bridal suite to get ready in is designed for beautiful pictures and for functionality. So the client is happy, the photographer is happy, the video is happy. Same with the guys' room. And then the garden area for ceremony has been designed where it's big enough for the guest count, but also for extra chairs, so that when people fill in, you don't have to fill in every single seat. And the backscape is designed where you can bring in your own decor pieces, your own elements. It's not particular to one aesthetic or the other. And then the reception, again, is kind of designed where any theme, any color scheme makes sense in the area. And then we wanted to make sure that there's plenty of parking on site so that you don't have to pay for a shuttle. The Snoqualmie Falls is 3 minutes down the street, so the picture opportunities are endless here. And then there's a Hilton Garden Inn right down the street, so your guests can come and hang out, easily get a shuttle from the hotel to this location. And then the casino is 5 minutes down the road, so it's a really fun destination wedding for anybody who's wanting to kind of create the atmosphere like you are in Tahoe or Vegas or something like that, but you are enjoying the beautiful Pacific Northwest aesthetic. So there's been years of thought being poured into this space that I cannot wait to watch people enjoy. This actually 2019, we have 3 weddings booked. And I can't wait to just watch them enjoy my blood, sweat, and tears that I have poured into this venue.
And so are you guys opening now or for dates, or are you going to get through I don't know how that works, how opening the venue works.
So we've put in we're getting we're getting all the permits from King County to have the weddings here. So we're on the tail end of that. We're okayed to have we're okay to have 30 weddings a year from King County. So we're just waiting to get that permit in hand. And then as soon as we do that, we're gonna have a grand opening party in May or June. And then just invite wedding planners and wedding industry people and caterers. And in the last 10 years, I've also been doing research on catering. So I wrote down, the caterers that I really enjoyed working with that bring a good product to the client and kind of fill any niche that they would want. So we interviewed them, did a tasting. So we've booked we have 4 different caterers that you're required to use. And so there was not anything done here that did not have a lot of thought poured into the decision making.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know as someone that I think we had talked about it last year at one of the weddings we did. And I know obviously you have lots of friends in the community, and I know it's a lot of people have been very excited about this and anxiously looking forward to it. And I was happy to get your call the other day, kind of getting the wheels going on doing the website and getting shoots. And so I just know that I think it'll be really exciting. I think, you hear a lot of times, I've even heard from couples, oh, we're going to get married and then open our own venue. And I've heard from clients and vendors and lots of things. And so I think it's just really exciting to kind of see this coming about. And I think it's going to be an awesome, obviously next step for you guys. And I know that there's a lot of people that are pulling for you guys and, looking forward to kind of seeing all the stuff there.
Yes, we are very, very excited to be able to offer this to our clients. And, again, there's definitely a niche for it with our Seattle clients. Not having, an outdoor option unless they go super north or super south. So we are really excited to fill that niche.
And I just want to make sure we mentioned the name on the podcast. I don't know if we talked about that.
We did. It's Evergreen Meadows. And the website is evergreenmeadowsvenue.com.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and scheduling this. I was so happy last week to get your call, even though I didn't know who it was at first. And I was so happy. She goes, oh, I go, hello. And she goes, oh, hi, this is Katrina. And I said, oh, okay. Cause it could be a client or a couple. I was, oh yeah. And we got to, you got to fake it till you make it sometimes. So yeah. I want to thank you so much for coming on today and taking the time. If people want to learn more about you and Love Blooms and your floral and everything else, we talked about the venue. Tell them how to get in touch with you about wedding planning.
So you can just go to our website, lovebloomseventdesign.com. And there's my phone number's on there, email address, or just our contact form, along with everything that we offer.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.